The pregnancy test showed positive for the third time in 18 months, and Sofia Vargas knew this baby would be taken from her just like the others. She stared at the plastic stick in the sterile bathroom of the Colorado ranch, her hands shaking not from morning sickness, but from the knowledge of what came next. Another 9 months of careful monitoring, premium nutrition, and prenatal vitamins. Another delivery where she'd hold her child for exactly 60 seconds before wealthy strangers carried them away forever. The ranch looked perfect from the outside. Rolling hills, pristine barns, horses grazing in manicured pastures. Dr. Harrison's website had called it a premier veterinary research facility, and Sofia had believed every word. After 3 years studying veterinary technology in La Paz, she dreamed of working with animals in America. The job posting had been specific, seeking Spanish-speaking veterinary assistant for livestock breeding program. Experience with artificial insemination preferred. Visa sponsorship available. Sofia had jumped at the opportunity. Bolivia's economy offered little for someone with her skills, and her family needed the money she could send from American wages. The application process had been thorough. Medical exams, psychological evaluations, even fertility tests. They explained it was standard for working with valuable breeding animals. Any health issues could affect the livestock. She'd passed every screening with flying colors. The journey to Colorado had been surprisingly easy. A legitimate work visa, airline tickets provided by the ranch, even someone to meet her at Denver International Airport. Maria, a friendly woman who spoke perfect Spanish, had driven her 3 hours into the mountains. The isolation should have worried Sofia, but the scenery was breathtaking. Snow-capped peaks, endless forests, air so clean it made her lightheaded after years in La Paz's smog. Harmony Ranch sprawled across 5,000 acres of pristine Colorado wilderness. The main house was a mansion, all glass and steel and modern architecture. The veterinary facilities looked state-of-the-art, better equipped than anything Sofia had seen in Bolivia. Dr. Richard Harrison welcomed her personally, a distinguished man in his 60s who spoke about his passion for genetic research and livestock improvement. But there were no animals, not in the main facilities. Anyway, Dr. Harrison explained they were between breeding cycles, that the valuable stock was kept in specialized facilities she'd see once she'd settled in. Her housing was comfortable, a private room in what looked like a dormitory, shared common areas with a kitchen and television. 5 other women lived there, all Spanish-speaking, all supposedly veterinary assistants. They seemed nervous around Dr. Harrison, avoiding eye contact when he spoke. The first week was orientation and training. Sofia learned about the ranch's revolutionary breeding program, its focus on genetic optimization and superior offspring. She studied charts and graphs about fertility cycles, nutrition requirements, environmental factors that affected conception rates. Everything seemed legitimate, even cutting edge, but still no animals to work with. It was Carmen, her roommate from El Salvador, who finally explained the truth. Not animals, women. The breeding program was for human babies, produced to order for wealthy clients who couldn't conceive naturally, or who wanted children with specific genetic traits that could be selected and guaranteed. The veterinary terminology wasn't metaphor, it was literal. They were the livestock. Sofia's first instinct was to run, but Carmen explained the reality of their situation. They were in the middle of nowhere, hours from any town. Their visas were controlled by Dr. Harrison. One called to immigration, and they'd be deported. Their families back home had received advance payments, money that would be clawed back with interest if they fled. And the contracts they'd signed, buried in legal language about reproductive health research, apparently gave the ranch certain rights over their bodies. The system was sophisticated and terrifyingly efficient. Each woman was assigned to produce children with specific genetic profiles. Sofia's file, which she glimpsed during a medical exam, listed her traits like a breeding chart. Height 5 feet 6 inches, IQ 128, no family history of genetic disorders, excellent bone structure. Her assigned breeding partners were selected from a catalog of men with complementary genetics, tall, intelligent, healthy specimens who were paid well for their contributions. Dr. Harrison explained it as a business arrangement, not exploitation. The women received excellent medical care, nutritious food, comfortable housing. They were paid for each successful pregnancy. Not enough to leave, but enough to support their families back home. The children went to wealthy couples who desperately wanted babies but couldn't produce them naturally. Everyone benefited from the arrangement, but Sofia's medical training made her understand what the others missed. The hormones they were given weren't just prenatal vitamins. They were fertility drugs that forced ovulation, increased chances of multiple births, regulated their cycles down to the day. The regular injections supposedly for immune system support were actually cocktails designed to optimize their reproductive output. They were being farmed like prize cattle. The men who fathered the babies were as trapped as the women, though they seemed less aware of it. Recruited through modeling agencies and college campuses, they thought they were participating in a high-end sperm donation program. They lived in a separate facility, enjoyed better accommodations and more freedom, but were equally controlled. Blood tests, genetic screenings, scheduled encounters that were documented and monitored. Sofia's first appointment was scheduled for her second week. The encounter room was designed to feel romantic. Soft lighting, music, a bed with silk sheets. But the cameras in the corners and the medical equipment nearby revealed its true purpose. The man assigned to her was handsome, young, nervous. He introduced himself as David and seemed as uncomfortable as she was with the clinical nature of their meeting. They were expected to conceive within 3 cycles. If natural methods failed, they'd move to artificial insemination using David's genetic material. If Sofia proved incompatible with David, she'd be reassigned to a different genetic donor. Everything was tracked, measured, optimized to the highest probability of producing the specific type of child their clients had ordered. The pregnancy that resulted felt like both miracle and curse. Sofia's body responded exactly as designed, hormones surging, appetite increasing, energy levels carefully monitored by the ranch's medical staff. She received the best prenatal care money could buy: organic food, vitamins, regular ultrasounds, even massage therapy. But every kindness came with the knowledge that she was an incubator, not a mother. The other women who'd already delivered warned her about what came next. The birth would be in the ranch's private medical facility, attended by doctors who specialize in these arrangements. She'd be allowed to hold the baby briefly, long enough for psychological bonding studies, they were told. Then the child would be taken to their new family, usually wealthy couples from major cities who'd paid substantial sums for a genetically optimized baby. Some women broke during this process. Carmen had tried to fight when they took her first baby and had been sedated, restrained, eventually convinced that resistance only meant longer separation from her family in El Salvador. Others, like Rosa from Mexico, had become almost robotic, treating each pregnancy as a job to complete. The ranch preferred women who could maintain emotional distance. It was less disruptive to the process. But Sofia's veterinary training gave her knowledge the others lacked. She understood the drugs they were given, the medical procedures performed on them, the long-term health consequences of repeated pregnancies with inadequate recovery time. The ranch treated them well in the short term, but was destroying their bodies systematically. Some women would never conceive naturally again after their time here. The clients who bought the babies were mostly American couples with specific requirements. They wanted children who looked like they could be naturally theirs but with enhanced genetics, higher intelligence, better health, superior physical traits. The ranch's catalog allowed them to select everything from hair color to projected adult height. It was custom baby manufacturing for people who viewed children as luxury products. Sofia began documenting everything she learned: the drugs they were given, the genetic testing performed on potential fathers, the client profiles she glimpsed during medical appointments. Her plan was simple: gather enough evidence to expose the operation, then find a way to contact authorities. But the ranch's isolation and control over communications made this nearly impossible. Her first baby was born healthy, a daughter with Sofia's dark hair and David's blue eyes, exactly as ordered by the client family. The moment they placed her in Sofia's arms, she felt love so fierce it was physically painful. 60 seconds later, when they took her away, Sofia understood why some women never recovered from this experience. She created life only to have it stolen. The recovery period was carefully managed. Antidepressants to manage the psychological trauma, hormone treatments to prepare her body for the next pregnancy, counseling sessions designed to help her process the experience. Dr. Harrison spoke about the joy they brought to a family who couldn't have children naturally, the wonderful life her daughter would have with parents who could provide everything. But Sofia had seen the contracts, knew what the clients paid. Her daughter hadn't been adopted by desperate couples. She'd been sold to wealthy buyers who wanted a designer baby. The difference mattered, though Dr. Harrison insisted it was merely semantic. The children were placed with loving families who happened to pay substantial fees for the privilege. The second pregnancy came quickly. The ranch was efficient. As soon as the doctors cleared Sofia for breeding, she was paired with a new genetic donor. This time it was Marcus, a graduate student recruited from Colorado University. He seemed to genuinely believe he was helping infertile couples while earning money for school. His naivety was almost heartbreaking. Sofia's second child was a son, genetically engineered to be tall, athletic, intelligent. The client family had even specified eye color and general facial features. When the baby was born with exactly the requested traits, Dr. Harrison praised the success of their genetic selection process. Sofia held her son for those same 60 seconds, memorizing his face before he disappeared forever. By her third pregnancy, Sofia had gathered enough evidence to expose the operation. She photographed documents, recorded conversations, documented the drug regimens and medical procedures, but she still had no way to contact outside authorities. The ranch monitored all communications, and the nearest town was hours away through mountain roads that were impassable in winter. That's when she met Jake, a maintenance worker who came monthly to service the ranch's equipment. Unlike the security staff, he wasn't part of the operation's inner circle. He performed routine repairs and left, usually within a day. Sofia realized he might be her only connection to the outside world. The plan took months to implement. Sofia had to build trust with Jake gradually, revealing information slowly to avoid alarming him. When she finally explained what was really happening at the ranch, his reaction was exactly what she'd hoped: horror, disbelief, then anger at being unknowingly complicit. He agreed to help her contact authorities. Jake smuggled out Sofia's evidence during his next visit: photos, documents, recordings, everything she gathered about the baby farming operation. He delivered it all to the FBI office in Denver, then disappeared. Sofia never learned what happened to him. But within weeks, federal agents arrived at the ranch with search warrants. The raid was swift and thorough. Dr. Harrison and his staff were arrested. The pregnant women were taken to hospitals for evaluation. The men in the breeding program were questioned and released. Most had genuinely believed they were participating in legitimate sperm donation. The babies already sold to clients became the center of legal battles that would last years. Sofia's own legal situation was complicated. She was simultaneously victim and key witness, undocumented immigrant and trafficking survivor. The T visa process took months, during which she lived in a Denver safe house, testifying repeatedly about her experiences. The legal system struggled to categorize what had happened. Was it trafficking, kidnapping, fraud, or something new that existing laws couldn't address? The ranch's client files revealed the scope of the operation. Hundreds of wealthy couples had purchased babies over nearly a decade. Some claimed they believed the children were born to surrogate mothers who'd volunteered. Others admitted they'd known the truth, but hadn't cared as long as they got the designer babies they wanted. The legal battles over custody and fraud would consume courts for years. Dr. Harrison's defense was predictable. He claimed the women had known what they were agreeing to, that they'd been paid fairly for their services, that the children had been placed with loving families. The prosecution's evidence told a different story of coercion, fraud, and systematic exploitation of vulnerable immigrants desperate for work in America. Sofia testified for 3 days, recounting every detail of her time at the ranch. The jury's faces showed increasing horror as she described the breeding schedules, the forced pregnancies, the children taken away forever. Defense attorneys tried to portray her as a willing participant who'd only claim victimhood when caught, but the evidence was overwhelming. The verdicts brought some justice, but couldn't undo the damage. Dr. Harrison received 25 years for human trafficking and fraud. Several staff members got shorter sentences. The ranch was seized and sold, its proceeds going to victim compensation. But the children remained with their purchaser families. their origins a secret they might never learn. Sofia's 3 children were among them. Her daughter would be for now, her son 3. The third child she'd been pregnant with during the raid, barely a year old. They lived with families who paid substantial sums for genetically optimized babies, raising them as their own biological children. Sofia would never see them again, would never know if they were happy or healthy or loved. The T visa eventually led to permanent residency, then citizenship. Sofia found work at a legitimate veterinary clinic in Denver, using skills she'd actually trained for. She sent money to her family in Bolivia, though she could never fully explain where her American wages came from. How do you tell your parents you've been bred like livestock for wealthy couples who bought children like luxury cars? Therapy helped, slowly and incompletely. Sofia learned to live with the trauma, the loss, the knowledge that her children existed somewhere in America with people who'd purchased them. She dated carefully, struggled with intimacy, found it difficult to trust anyone completely. The ranch had taught her that even helping professions could be covers for exploitation. Other survivors faced similar challenges. Some returned to their home countries, unable to build lives in the place where they'd been trafficked. Others, like Sofia, stayed in America but remained haunted by their experiences. The support group they formed met monthly, sharing strategies for healing and advocacy work aimed at preventing similar operations. The ranch itself sat empty for years after the seizure, too remote and tainted for most buyers. Eventually, a legitimate cattle rancher purchased at auction, unaware of its history. The breeding facilities were converted back to actual livestock use. The irony wasn't lost on Sofia. The buildings designed for human farming now housed actual animals. Law enforcement used a ranch case to identify similar operations across the country. The wealthy client's willingness to pay premium prices for genetically selected children had created a market that other criminals sought to exploit. Raids uncovered facilities in remote areas of several states, some even more sophisticated than Dr. Harrison's operation. Sofia's work with trafficking prevention organizations became her way of fighting back. She spoke at conferences, trained law enforcement personnel, helped draft legislation to address baby farming specifically. Her veterinary background helped her explain the medical aspects of these operations, the ways women's bodies were manipulated and exploited for profit. The hardest part wasn't the past trauma, but the ongoing uncertainty. Somewhere in America, her 3 children were growing up. Did they look like her? Were they healthy? Happy? Did their purchaser parents love them genuinely? Or were they trophies? Proof of wealth sophisticated enough to buy superior children? She'd never know. Sometimes Sofia would see children who might be the right age, with features that reminded her of her own. She'd wonder, calculate ages, look for resemblances. But she'd never approach them, never disturb lives built on lies her suffering had made possible. The children were victims too, even if they'd never know it. Dr. Harrison died in prison 2 years into his sentence. Heart attack, the notification letter said. Sofia felt nothing at the news, not satisfaction, not closure, not relief. He'd been one man in a system that remained largely intact. Wealthy couples still wanted designer babies. Desperate women still needed work. The market forces that created operations like Harmony Ranch continue to operate. The ranch case led to new federal legislation, stronger penalties for trafficking, better protection for agricultural workers who might be vulnerable to such schemes. But Sofia knew that law was reactive. It addressed what already happened, not what was happening now in other remote facilities, other states, other countries with even fewer protections. She kept horses now, on a small property outside Denver. Real horses, not human livestock. She learned to ride during her recovery, finding peace in caring for animals that weren't being exploited. The horses didn't know her history, didn't judge her choices, didn't remind her children she'd never hold again. The pregnancy test she held in the ranch bathroom that final time had been her 3rd positive result in 18 months. But unlike the others, this baby hadn't been taken away. She'd been 8 weeks pregnant during the raid, and the trauma of arrest and testimony had caused a miscarriage. At the time, it felt like another loss. Now she wondered if it might have been mercy. Sofia had come to America to heal animals and found herself bred like one instead. She'd escaped with her life and freedom, but lost pieces of herself that would never be recovered. The children born from her body lived somewhere in America, carrying her genetics but not her love, her intelligence but not her story, her strength but not her suffering. The ranch was gone. Dr. Harrison was dead. The operation was ended. But the market that created remained, and somewhere in America's vast landscape, other ranches operated in similar isolation. Other women carried children they'd never raise. Other wealthy couples paid premium prices for babies designed to their specifications. Sofia survived it all. But some kind of freedom, once lost, could never be fully regained. Some children, once taken, could never be recovered. Some prices, once paid, echoed forever. She'd learned to live with all of it, to build meaning from survival, to find purpose in preventing others from suffering what she'd endured. But 3 children remained lost to her forever, living lives built on a foundation of purchased genetics and stolen love. In quiet moments, she wondered if they'd inherited not just her intelligence and health, but also her capacity for survival. They would need it, growing up as product in a world that still saw children as commodities to be optimized, purchased, and owned. The breeding was over. The children were gone. Sofia lived free now, but freedom tasted different when seasoned with such permanent loss. She'd come to heal animals and learn instead how humans could be turned into livestock, how love could be manufactured for profit, how hope could be weaponized against the desperate. America had given her citizenship, but taken her children. The ranch had promised veterinary work, but delivered reproductive slavery. The clients had bought superior babies, but built their families on stolen genetics and systematic exploitation. Everyone had gotten what they'd paid for, except the women whose bodies had produced the profits and the children whose origins would remain forever secret. Sofia worked with animals now, legitimately, but she remembered what it felt like to be treated as one, and that memory shaped everything she did in the free life she'd finally claimed.